Backed by popular demand, Chief Tracy of the Wilmington Police Department, we had several other questions from our first interview that we just didn't get a chance to finish. And we wanted you to know, you the viewers, to know that you were on the Chief's mind and what his, his take on things are and his direction for the city in regards to public safety. Chief Tracy, welcome back to the agenda.
Thank you for having me again.
We wanted to talk about violence in the city, right? It's, again, not a secret. Wilmington has, I hate the expression when people say, oh, the city's on fire, right? Mm-hmm. Not because I'm not from Wilmington, but Wilmington is a part of my life. And I don't want to think of this city as being on fire. I don't want people to not come to this city for a reason. I want Market Street to be booming. I want, a more diverse community to be moving into the city and blossoming. So negative connotation I don't think is necessary. But what I do think is necessary is truth, right? And the truth of the matter is gun violence is a factor in this city and has been for some time now. So what are some of the things that this department is doing to help curb that?
Well, first of all, let's analyze what's really going on. Even in a city like Wilmington, we often talk about it's violent. No, even in the most challenged community, it's not a violent community. There's some small percentage of individuals that are violent within that community. Mm-hmm. So, you look at cities and you do an audit of people with the highest propensity of violence, and it goes for Wilmington as well, and we've done that here, is that it's less than 0.5% are committing 60 to 70% of the violent crime. Wow, so do you have to arrest the whole community to affect the few that the community asks us, hey Chief, can you do something about those individuals that might be shooting in our community and causing problems? Because nobody wants a person that's going to pick up a gun and they're going to use it against someone else and or a crowd, as you've seen. And what can we do about that? Well, there's a lot of things you can do in policing if you do it the right way. What we've gotten wrong in policing for a lot of years, and I've seen it even in my years in the prior experience that I have, is that when you see an area that might have some violence in it, we flood that area with hundreds of officers. Mm-hmm. And how do officers in that area get, how do they get rated or how they see if they're doing? It's about the amount of arrests. Mm-hmm. So you go in, you suppress the crime, you're in there for a short period of time, and yeah, there really is no crime, but what did you do to get to that point? You actually affected all the other people that weren't involved in it. Summonses, parking tickets, stopping individuals that shouldn't be stopped. And it works, but then you leave, and then the community is very upset in how they were treated when they asked you just to look at the individuals that are causing the violence. Mm-hmm. So you do that working with the community to reduce the violence.
And changing the matrix of success.
Success. And you don't measure, here's another thing that we got wrong in policing, is that we were measuring outputs and not outcomes. Mm-hmm. And we got to make sure that when that, and if you see any of my reports, I rarely, other than gun arrests, I don't talk about the amount of arrests we make, because every time you have to make an arrest, someone has to go into the system. Mm-hmm. And they've broken the law. We make those constitutionally. There's complainants on these things, but I rather measure the amount of reduction in crime. And that's what I've done going back to my days in New York, Chicago, and here. The success is having lower crime or no crime rather than the amount of arrests. Because if you're having arrests, then you have that issue. And don't get me wrong, you're going to have to make some arrests because there are complainants, there are crimes that are committed. But when it comes to gun crimes, I've always been serious about this. If you go to any time that I've been at city council, public safety meetings, I talk about the legal possession of a firearm in a community. And that's a gateway crime to a shooting or a murder. Because even if you're carrying it around, you might be impulsively go to use it. And when everybody knows the rules that it's not okay to carry a gun, and there is consequence for everyone, everybody will put those guns down. But when the system itself is no consequence, more people will carry. Therefore, you have more conflicts. More people have the ability to shoot at each other. I'm a big believer that we've done it in New York, and we've done it in Chicago, and we're doing it here. And we're starting to see the amount of bail that's raised for a person carrying it. If you look at the alerts, and we're on a NICSA alert, I wish everybody, please sign up for it. We can put alerts out, not just always about arrests, but a lot of the good things that are happening in the Wilmington Police Department. And it shows what's happening in the community and what the officers are doing to keep your community safe. If you arrest a person with a firearm, there has to be a consequence for carrying that illegal firearm. Therefore, you change the behavior of individuals, and therefore, you end up lowering the violence. Because if we're in a community where 95% of our homicides are by gunshot, then if you reduce the amount of people carrying guns, you reduce the shootings, which reduces the homicides. It sounds very simple, but it's very complex because we're the front end of the criminal justice system. We can make the arrests, but we have to count on the back end of the criminal justice system to make sure that they're following through, which we have a very good relationship. We understand each other. If there's issues, we talk about them to make sure that we're not releasing people back in the community that are going to cause more harm. And that's some of the things that do slip through, but the communication that goes on between us, the prosecutor's offices, defense attorneys, we got to make sure that we don't want to arrest people, but we've got to keep people safe. And that's a very small percentage, again, that are carrying firearms. If we're arresting 300 people a year out of 77,000 live in a community, and how many more people come into our community? Because some people are outside in the county, our people go out there, they come in, we have visitors. That's a very small percentage, and we can concentrate on them. Once again, not trying to arrest the whole community to get the few. And then we have things called group violence intervention that I would love to get into at some point, if we can be on this segment or another segment, about the things that we can do to help those that, for whatever reason, the trauma that in their life, that educational issues, things that have happened in their life, no job, making sure why are they turning to a life of violence. And let's make sure that we can get them on the right track so we don't have to continue arresting them, and we make them productive members of the community. And through group violence intervention, yes, there is a place where there will be enforcement, but we actually sit down with groups of gangs and crews that are in conflict with each other and let them know it's not acceptable. And we use the moral voice of the community, from a person that might have lost a child to gun violence. And then we also use social services through the state services, where we have to be legitimate that we're going to help these individuals out. I always talk about police legitimacy. There also has to be legitimacy of a trust for the individuals in that we're going to give them the help. And that's done through John Cook, and it's through the Department of Health and Social Services. And we work together with the state. And we brought that into Wilmington, and we get ahead of individuals that are coming out of jail or the ones that might be involved in conflict. And we offer them services from relocation to get them out of the area, their families, and also anything that we can from a GED to substance abuse issues, to make sure housing, to make sure we get a job training. And these are the type of things that if we can bring them in and give them alternatives, and then we have the legitimacy that we're real and we're serious about this, then we can start to break down these crews from being in conflict and get a lot of the individuals that are resorting to that because of the experiences in their lives.
So what would you, to that, and I can't agree with you more about sustainment of that, but I like to bring them to the forefront of this show, and there are several people on the east side and on the west side who are scared to leave their homes at certain times of night. There's family members that are not visited at certain points of the day, or just not coming over because they live in this part of the city. And for them, they do not have the statistical analysis as you do to understand about the downward trend of violence in the city. They're still seeing violence every night. So for those people, or they're hearing it, it may not be to the fruition where there's cones in front of their house, but hearing gunshots is very stressful in your community. And then not having the confidence to be able to tell a law enforcement executive about this, or a law enforcement person about this, because of retaliation is also a big factor in our community, and has been for years. It just isn't in your administration. This is something that has happened for years. But what would you tell that person that's right now that's watching TV that's not comfortable in their own home, a home that they work for, a home that they pay for, a home that they're raising their family in, and they're reluctant to let their kids out of their house? This isn't something, again, that has changed, but it doesn't seem to be getting any better for them directly. What would you tell them?
What I can tell people is that get to the community meetings, try to get it as a group. If you have the community meetings, start to get involved in your civic associations. Make sure you're there. We will be at them. That's a comfortable place where you can at least speak in a group, and the group, it's not acceptable, the violence that's outside. Doing it as an individual sometimes can be very tough, and I understand that. But as you get to know our police officers, our detectives are able to solve more cases now because we're making sure that we make that connection with the individual in the neighborhood where they start to build trust. Before, we didn't really have that, and we always got to work on it. that the only time we started talking to some of the residents is when something bad happened, we wanted information. First, they don't know us, and you're only talking, and you're going to put them somewhat in a little bit of danger if someone sees you speaking to the police out in the street. What's happening now is that they have our phone numbers, they have our contact, and some in the community, they start to call in and say, hey, we believe this is the reason this happened, so-and-so is doing this. Overwhelmingly giving us, and the information, if it's accurate, it's probably we already have it and they're validating. If it's something that where we're in an investigation and where we're saying, wait a second, we were going this direction, but it might be this direction. But I think the community groups, getting involved in the civic associations, coming together as a community, being strong, join those community civic groups, join those organizations, because you have more power in the voice of many in the community than by yourself. And I understand sometimes it's a reality. You know, where I live, you know, I'm up on the north side. You know, sometimes I have trepidation if I have 5 children and I have a few teenagers. If they walk to a certain area, because I actually can hear gunshots, and I'm the chief of police. You know, my wife says, you need to do something about that. I said, I'm trying. I said, I'm putting everything in place. So I am part of the community. I do understand what it's like to hear that. And I also have trepidation where I have young teenagers that can be mistaken for someone that might be part of another crew. So I have those fears, and I have to teach them, hey, where to be safe, where not to be safe. In those areas, I know it's a concern. It's good to be conscious of it. I hope that the more we continue to do coming out of this, the more you can start to believe in what we're doing as we reduce the violence. Hopefully we can get those streets opened up where kids can play in there and you don't have that fear. And that's where we need to be, and that's where we're trying to get to.
Switching gears, the City Council President, Trippy Congo, has asked for plans on several occasions in regards to the city, and his comment was that he hadn't received them. So as we're making these decisions, and you brought up some really great organizations, which we can talk about more about changing the lives of youth in the city and doing some things in regards to that, what would you say to the council president right now as far as those plans go and what the city is asking for? Is that something that you could provide?
Well, I have provided them.
Okay.
And the thing, last city, right before the end of the year, I put it out publicly. We put it through a department announcement to all the press, and I've given it to the city council dozens of times, sometimes to a point where they say I talk about it too much and that it's taking up too much time. I have written plans, and I have sent it out, and I'm happy to share exactly what we put out a couple of months ago and how it'll move forward. And we're seeing a lot of successes of it. But we have to remember, there was a lot of disruptions in the last couple of years that between education, the court system, jobs, and it actually affected us as well. And as we come out of it, we got to make sure we do the things that we're doing right. And I talk about them. And one of the biggest things is communication, community engagement, and the strategies. That's all in there. And I'd love to share that with you because that's been shared numerous times. And I've updated, and it's not something that's rigid. It's something that we can adapt to, we can shift, we can pivot with the times, and we adjust to, because any good strategy needs to be flexible. And those are the things that we have put out and I have reported out on. And if there's anything specific that anybody wants to know about that might be missing in that, I'm more than happy to address it.
What we'll do, and what I promise you, is that we'll provide a link on the show, and we'll probably provide it right now that people can use to get this information, because it's public information, right? They can go out and find it, and then maybe we can put a little bit of this to rest, or have some future dialogue about it as well.
There's a year-end report that we put out that actually explains everything, and it goes through all our statistics on how the year ended and what we've done and our accomplishments and what we need to do. That's out there. We've reported it. It's up on our website. We have pushed it out. I think the difficulty is that sometimes everything that we report out is not always accepted by the news media to report back out. So we always have to find ways, what medium, what venue can we put out to make sure it's heard. And I think doing more things like this with you and some of the other shows on the cable news network, I think I can reach more of the audience. I'd love to do it in person, now that we're getting back to in-person community meetings. But I definitely hope that people can have a better understanding of what we're doing and understanding some of the strategies. And I really appreciate this opportunity.
And we appreciate you, and we appreciate you being here on the agenda, Chief. Anytime you have anything to say, we want to be that public voice for you.
Well, thank you.
So we're here with Councilwoman Cabrera. Thank you very much for joining us here on the agenda. and we're talking about your lovely city of Wilmington. And we've had Chief Tracy on. Before we get to the data, let's just be very clear in regards to your stance. Do you have confidence in Chief Tracy?
I do have confidence in the chief, and I'll tell you what I did, my own personal research. I started calling police officers that I know on the department, that I trust, that have been there for a while, that have seen the before and the after. African American police officers as well as Hispanic police officers. And I asked them their opinion, confidential. I said, please tell me how things are going. One of them said to me, very trusted, he said, listen, I don't care what anybody says. As far as I'm concerned, the chief came in here, he cleaned up some of the problems that we had, and no, he's not a favorite for doing that. He got rid of some of that culture that existed.
But some of that culture is still here, though.
Oh, it's still here. It's hard to eradicate something that's been around for a long time.
Now, you brought with us some vital statistics in regards to Wilmington and crime.
Well, when we say no competency, right? So what was the no competency on? Was it that certain council members didn't feel that the chief was communicating the data, that the information wasn't getting to them, that it wasn't more of a face-to-face? I'm not sure because I'm not them. All I know I was taken aback, and I wanted, I was in a meeting the day before with the mayor to discuss the budget, and we started talking about policing and the violence, and he said, our police department has really been out there hustling, and he started talking about some of the things that happened, the 300 guns that have been taken off the streets, the 9 members of the North Pack gang that were arrested. That alone, I was in a meeting today with the Attorney General to again discuss what ways we can really prevent the crime, getting to the root causes, not the stuff that we can do immediately or policing, but our youth, the youth engagement. How do we prevent them from even going in that direction? Because that's what we really need to get to the root cause, and those are going to be long-term solutions. But in that conversation, we talked about the North Pack gang, and she said, Maria, just alone with those 9 people that we arrested, there were six murders that they were responsible for. There was a reason why we went 75 days without a shooting, because the cause of them were taken in, the investigations were done. And that to me is a good thing, because it's specific. And then you have the innocent bystanders that get hit in the process. So I'm seeing that the guns are being taken off the streets, but the more guns they take, the more that are out there.
So you mentioned in your statistics that there's been 60 gun arrests this year alone.
Yes.
And I guess the number of gun issues, gun-related crimes are increasing from 20 to 21.
Yes, they definitely did. There was more accessibility. So our country has an issue with guns.
Right.
That's the bottom line. Nobody can deny that. And as an inner city who faces challenges of poverty and jobs and things of that nature, I mean, we are a high poverty level city. We're not exempt from those problems that are happening across the nation, but nobody cares about that. We care about what happens in our neighborhood. So the question is, how do we fix it?
Let DART do the driving. DART First State provides transportation that is clean, safe, reliable, and affordable. Plan your trip and get real-time bus information with the free DART Transit app. Scan your phone to pay your fare with the free DART Pass app. So what are you waiting for? Try transit today. Visit dartfirststate.com or call 1-800-652-DART.
So on a local level, what is your aspirations in regards to change? Like, what would you love to see council put forward that could help with this issue?
Well, see, this is where it gets tricky, and this is where it's hard for us to say. I don't want to tell you that I don't have power, because I do have. I mean, I met with the Attorney General today. Councilman Darby brought this representative in to talk about policing and reform, and he said it's not about defunding the police, but it's about looking at how we police strategically in our communities and making those changes. We know that in Wilmington, even trying to get this policing review board, we're dependent on the charter and the state legislatures for some of the changes that have to happen. The Leopold, Can we vote on that? We can send all the resolutions we want down to Dover, but if the representatives in Dover don't take action, and I'm not even talking about our Wilmington delegation as much as the rest of the state, because I feel that maybe in areas where they don't have these issues, it may not be important to them. It may not be a high priority. And I think it's a little hard too when, you know, you have a lot of retired police officers that are now serving, and I appreciate their service.
That's a very interesting point that you bring up.
But, you know, I mean, if they can't honestly look at the issues and the problems without worrying about what their fellow officers in blue think, then, you know, how are you going to make progress? One of the examples that Mr. Mayor gave was that the agenda that they were able to put forward came from the actual FOP. These are measures that the FOP said, yes, these should be taken on a national level. So now that he's working in Milwaukee, how can Milwaukee police say, oh, we don't want to do these things, this is when it came right from the police? So it's the suggestion. So I do believe that there is engagement, that there are organizations, people like Mr. Mayor's, that are working with police to institute the changes. And I firmly believe that there's more police officers who want things done the right way than the scattered few that do things the wrong way.
And the other part about that is one thing that we can do as a community, and one thing that, not necessarily as a community, excuse me, but what we can do legislatively and from a municipality standpoint is ensure that we have a diverse police force, and ensuring that the upcoming police classes, graduates, look more like the communities in which they're serving. I think that's a very important factor in regards to law enforcement. And for the recent class, or the upcoming class, I'm not sure if they've graduated yet, it is showing that the Wilmington Police Department is making steps in that direction.
Yes, and that's a perfect segue, because I did want to share those numbers with you. So the class that graduated last April, the 100th Academy, that particular class had 5 African-American males, 1 female. Hispanic, it had 1 Hispanic female, and it had 3 Caucasian females. And of course, women are considered minorities. Now, even the president of City Council congratulated the chief for having a very diverse class. But this recruitment class is actually even more diverse. We have 12 African-American males, 4 African-American females, 4 Hispanic males, 2 Hispanic females, 2 white females, and 1 multiracial male. Now, what I want to say when it comes down to the police officers that we recruit and who makes the academy and who makes the class, and this is a question that I'm going to ask Mr. Mayor, do we need to look at our recruitment? Is it so strict? And of course we want police officers that are qualified.
Absolutely.
But is it so strict? Do we have to look at the guidelines that it actually closes the door for more minorities to be able to participate? I mean, something you did when you were a teenager can actually be used, and you would not be able to be part of that police academy. So I think that some of the guidelines or the parameters that they have to meet to be a police officer actually push away more of the minority community. So we have to find a way that there's a balance. The other thing that I found that was heartening that he said is that they're trying to institute now in certain states, they're doing this testing, the psychological testing that will give you results as to whether that person would be able to handle policing, or would they use force, or would they be someone who would be more subjective to using force and not being a good police officer. But the people that are already there, you can't do the testing on them because they're protected. But these new people, these new recruits, cities and states can put these guidelines into place to kind of weed out the people who may not mentally be able to do this. Now, look at the current culture and how people feel about police. And rightfully so for some of the things that have happened. The sins have been atrocious, and they get a free pass. But now we're seeing more of a crackdown. We had the largest demonstrations that we've ever seen in our country in terms of police reform after what happened to Mr. Floyd. So I'm glad to see those changes, but I also want to, warn the community, don't lump all the police officers and put them all in one basket, because we have solid, good police officers out there. And I know that none of us, I don't want to be judged and say, all politicians do this, all politicians. I'm Maria Cabrera. I know that I represent my community. I go forward to help the people that need it. I do the best that I can. I don't want to be lumped with a politician or someone who did a bad job or who's sneaky or who lied and then say that I'm like that. So I don't think it's fair to do that to the police. Yes, do bad apples get in? They do. So the important thing is to have measures in place, number one, to prevent it. Number two, if they get there, how you can eliminate it. But we shouldn't judge all the police officers. So I think that right now we're at a precipice in our country where we can make real change and we can engage all of the community and really have these relationships that we need with our police officers. But the way that we look at police right now, would you jump into the academy if everybody hates the police?
Absolutely, but I don't think I'd pass the physical.
I'm just saying that we don't have a lot of people from the minority communities jumping in there and volunteering to be police officers. Thank God we have this academy that we have. But if we want to see the change, then we got to be the change.
Well, and you are the change, and we'd like to thank you for being on the agenda today and ensuring that your citizens and the people that you represent in your community maintain on the agenda. Thank you very much,
Thank you for
Councilwoman.
having me.
So getting a different perspective, we're here with Mr. Hanif Salam from the ACLU. Thank you for joining us here on the agenda.
Thanks for having me.
We appreciate your insight. We appreciate your work. Please tell the viewers who don't know, now there's not going to be many people who don't know who you are, but for those that do not know, tell us who you are and your role with the ACLU.
Yeah, again, my name is Haneef Salaam. I am the Smart Justice Campaign Manager for the ACLU of Delaware. And my primary role is to work on criminal justice reform because we need effective community review boards that can review, investigate, and subpoena WPD officers when they engage in misconduct. Because Chief Tracy has shown we cannot trust the police themselves. Misconduct goes without any accountability. I mean, we have officers shooting people and killing people in the street without any accountability. So, you know, he always sound good in the sound bites because I've heard him talk too, but Chief Tracy gotta show me better than he can tell me.
Okay, so putting safeguards in place, which is important. Tell us a little bit about Senate Bill 149.
So Senate Bill 149's main purpose is to amend LEO Board, the Law Enforcement Officer Bill of Rights. Now, one thing that I want people to understand is Delaware is the only state that keeps police misconduct records and investigations private forever. We're the only state that does that, and it's due to our LEO Board law. So we'd like to amend this LEO Board law where police discipline records would be accessible to the public, and we can have effective community review boards, as I said earlier, that will review, investigate, and be able to discipline police when they engage in misconduct.
When I'm talking about rights and I'm talking about the violation of rights by police, I am thinking you're at the apex of this as being a representative of the American Civil Liberties Union, ACLU. So what are your thoughts on the Safe Street and some of the I don't want to call them jump squads, but these roaming patrols?
I think it's excessive and it's ineffective, and this is why I say this. I have seen instances where Safe Streets specifically, right, have ran down on individuals for arrestable offenses, right, and let them go in hopes that that individual was going to come back with information on a murder or somebody with a gun, right, right. And I know of instances where people may have provided information, and then in times where the individual did not provide information in a timely manner, Safe Streets went about impressing the charges that they initially confronted the individuals on. I myself personally had a run-in with 2 known Safe Street officers just around this time last year. Just driving in my car with my brother-in-law, we were pulled over due to expired tags, which definitely was my fault. But due to my expired tags, once we were pulled over, I was immediately yanked out my car, not asked to get out, yanked out. You know what I'm saying? Thrown up against a cop car and searched, and my car searched, while me and my brother-in-law was in the middle of Washington Street as traffic passed by. That's excessive and ineffective.
What would be your suggestion I make it clear to most of our guests here is that politicians, civic leaders watch this show. What would be your recommendation to Chief Tracy? What would be your recommendation to City Council? what would be your recommendation to citizens here in Wilmington in regards to the Wilmington Police Department as far as cleaning up their act or a change that needs to be made?
I'll start with the citizens first. I need for Ernie and everybody that's watching this to contact their state senator and state representative and let them know that we need to get SB 149 passed. Currently, Wilmington City Council has already passed an ordinance that will allow for Wilmington to have a community review board that would take complaints, would investigate those complaints, as well as review how the Wilmington Police Department handled the complaint, right? And they would also provide recommendations on hiring and firing matters to the department. This board cannot be implemented due to state law. And we have our state legislators who are stalling with SB 149 because law enforcement are in avid opposition of this bill, right? So I'm asking everybody, please contact their state legislator, their state representative.
Mr. Salaam, thank you very much for your time. Appreciate it.
Thanks for having me.
Consider this home here on the agenda. We look forward to seeing you again.
All right, I'll be back soon then.
Okay.